For this video, we are going to build the layout for the top part of the 99U website, meaning all the way from replacing Twitter, the article over here, until just above the featured videos. We're going to use Suzy to create this layout over here, and we're going to go through what to take note of when creating the layout. Okay, on the left side over here you can see HTML, which is currently blank, and on the right side you will see the SAS file. We won't be touching any JavaScript in this demo. When you take a look at 99U, you'll find that there are 3 columns to it, and it seems like an asymmetric layout because this and this and this doesn't seem to add up to any number of columns or something. So we can use an asymmetric layout for this demo. The troublesome part is this load more post area. It's right at the bottom of the whole thing, and it spans across both the 2 columns. And on the right side, there's an ad with a background that goes all the way down to the end of the layout. When we create styles, this kind of layout presents a little problem if we do it the traditional float way. So for this demo, we are going to use Flexbox to create the layout over here in conjunction with Suzy. So let's first begin by writing the HTML for this container. Alright, so let's first write the HTML doc type, which I won't go through in much detail. What's important here is the meta viewport, because it has to contain the width equals to device width, initial scale equals to 1, and it has to work on mobile devices. And we're doing responsive design as well, because we're because we're going to do responsive. If you take a look at 99U, as it goes down, it becomes 2 columns with the load more still there, and as it goes further down, there's only 1 column. The workbook is gone as well. So the workbook column is gone as well on the mobile. There's only 2 columns. The ad column is gone on like 1000 pixels or something. And after that, the ad appears. So we can begin by setting up the project so that the styles is reflected properly. Alright, before we begin writing any CSS, let's make sure that the SAS file works properly. So I'll usually give a background of like red to check that it's working fine. So this background becomes red, it's working fine. And then we'll just remove it and it goes back. Over here in our layout, we have 3 different things to look out for. Over here in HTML, because we are going to make multiple Suzy grids, 2, 3, 4 different Suzy grids on this page alone, we will give the rep a specific name for it. So say we name this rep top, and within rep top you can see that these 2 together should form a div by itself, and the sidebar will be another div because we have to accommodate this load more post area. And with Flexbox, we can make the 3rd column stretch all the way to be in line with this few columns combined. So what we can do over here is to create a layout component for this. Say this is content top and sidebar, or let's call this ads top. It makes more sense. Within ads, we can just say this is an ads item, an ads component. So this is a div for ads. Now let's put our focus back onto content for these two columns. There are two columns there are a total of 3 columns in here. First, second, and the third column will hold this load more post. Oops. So the third column will hold the load more post area on 99U, and that's what we will be working on. So in our HTML, it will be like this. Say there's an article over here. Followed by multiple articles, which we'll touch on later. And there's a workbook section. So I'm going to do some comments as we go along, which makes it easier to read. And there's a third div in this area. And within there, there's a button. That says load more posts. Over here. Oh wait, it's in small letters. So right here, we only see a button, and this is a div for ads in our HTML, so we can't really see anything. Let's also move on and write some HTML for the articles component and the workbooks component, so we can really see what's in there in the HTML when you create the Suzy code. Okay, so let's move on. Over here, you can see each article, there is a similar pattern to things. There is a category title over here, followed by an article title, a byline, an image, an excerpt, and some share buttons, followed by a border on each article. And this is what we're going to do for one article. Within the article component, let's also change this to article to make it slightly more semantic. There's an article category. So the category in this case is disconnecting. There's an article title, which is replacing Twitter with iPhone. Interesting name. And this article is a link, so let's also wrap that in a link. Then followed by that, we have the byline. So which is by James Ray. You can see that this byline is not a link, but James over here is a link. So then we have the image. An image can usually be placed within an object. We will go through the differences between an object and a component at a different screencast, but let's move on for now. then we can use placeholder image for now. After the image, there's an excerpt as well. We give it some comments. And let's repeat this for like 4 times, just to have some content in the HTML site. Looks good right now. At least we have some content that we can fill our layout with. Now let's create the HTML for the workbook. A few of them will do. So for the workbooks section, there is a workbooks kind of like a header that holds this, followed by the rest of the workbook's content. Okay. So the workbook's header holds, the whole thing is a class. As you can see, the cursor is a pointer. It's wrapped in a tag. Oops. Okay, following the header, we have the body content that has, all of them are links, because you can hover anywhere and it's still a cursor, with the title, some text, and the date, the time. That's what a workbook has. So within workbooks, with the workbook body, with the S and workbooks. Within each, we have a workbook. As we mentioned, the workbook has an anchor tag that wraps around every item, the whole item, and it has a title. How to stop stressing? Stop stressing. Oh man. How to stop stressing and start doing. There is also an entry or excerpt. It's called an excerpt. Maybe you want to give it a div instead of a span. And let's put a paragraph in there. 1.2. Oops. Over here. And finally there's a time, there's a metadata. Oh, I almost forgot the double underscore over here. Let's do div as well. And then in here there's a time that says 21 hours ago. We'll be going into the time attributes and all of that. So this is what the workbook looks like. If you head over and take a look, there's the workbook's header, one workbook item. So let's duplicate that for maybe like 5-6 times. There's some content to work with. Right, so now we have enough content to work with for the first part of the HTML, and we can get started on working with Suzy. Over here, as you can see, we can set up the Suzy grid for this layout. We mentioned earlier that we're going to use the isolate. Sorry, we mentioned earlier that we're going to use asymmetric grids because the 3 grids here seems to be asymmetric. When we start with an asymmetric grid, we need to change the style. Oh, I have an asymmetric grid over here, so here we go. We have 3 columns, and since we are working on asymmetric grids, it doesn't matter if the sizes are not accurate right now. We can make that more accurate later. Let's put it as 3 because we have 3 columns. If the number of columns doesn't change, we can still use back the same item. The container in this case is about 1000 pixels. So container at the maximum width is about 1000. The output must be isolate, global box sizing, and then let's put this as show columns. So you have the columns and not the baselines because I work with vertical rhythms. And since we have this done for us, right? Since after we have set up the Suzy grid, we can start by creating the layouts. I've put it in a layouts partial. So in this case, it's L-rep-top instead of L-rep. When working with libsass, you must have a gutters over here, otherwise the whole thing will screw up. So here we go. There are 3 columns, with gutters of 0.25 right now. We can adjust the gutters later. No, we also mentioned that these 2 individual columns are nested in this outer column over here. If you draw some boxes around it, this is the whole rep that we are going to work with. There are 2 things within. We have a ads section, and we have a content section over here. So this is content, and this is ads. Let's change the color, so too bright. Then within content, we have 2 other columns. First one, the second one, and the third one. This is load more. This is the holder for articles, and this is the holder for workbook. This is what the grid structure should look like, and we have written our HTML in this way, where this content is layout, content top, and ads over here has ads top. Okay, so we have this first two columns right now. Let's try to make sure the article and workbook constrain to the first two columns for now. And we want the third item, naming the ads, to stretch all the way to the bottom, to have the same, to be like this, where you can have this background stretch all the way to this line over here. We can use flexbox like we mentioned before. So you can give wrap top display flex. And for this particularly, you can say align items stretch. This will give the flexbox layout that we need for the items. So now the third thing, the div, is on the third column. It's slightly wrong over here because we haven't used Suzy to correct the width yet. But if we give the ads section a background color, I'll say gray, you see that it stretches all the way to the end, and that is what we need. So we have to make sure the content section takes up two columns instead of protruding out like right now. I think it was content. L dash content dash top. Include span 2 first. And that keeps it over here. We also want to make sure the ads is floated. It's not really float. Yeah, not floated. Span 2 first. So if you take a look here, the content is in the correct position right now, but the ads is gone. This is because we use float in flexbox, and floats doesn't work well with flexbox. So instead of using span the function, instead of using a span mixin, we just use the span function to get the correct width values. We will want to use span 2 first, because if we change the Suzy columns over here, say 2.4, 1.6, and 1, it still corresponds to the correct location. For ads, we also have to make sure that it spans 1, so we have to give it the correct width. Span 1 last. And you can see that the correct width has been given to the ads as well. There's also some paddings to the left and right. So we have to give some paddings in order to maintain it. So padding, let's say there's a gutter padding, and to the right side there's a gutter padding as well. I forgot to mention, if you're working with borders, like over here, between two columns, then the best way to work with this is to use the isolate gutter position. The inside gutter position. The inside gutter position creates paddings, so there is a simple way to have a border running down the left side over here without much problems. So if we can do a border left, and we can see the border if we remove the background. see the slide border over here? If you can't, we can still remove the background image for now. There we go. There's a border over here. Alright. For now, let's leave ads with without the background, or we can give it. Let me take a, yeah, there's a components with ads over here. So we can head out back to styles, create a components for ads. Over here, if you are creating a components for ads, let's head into the SAS folder, into the components folder, and create a ad file. And for the ads, background of F7, F7, F7. That's the correct color for the background. And when we save this, then C-ads. Yep. Oh, we named it wrongly. It's ads, not ad. Ads. And here, there's a div for ads. Now that we have ads in here, we know that ads stretches the full column, but we needed to give the background to the inner item. So we have to stretch the inner item as well. We can do that by making the ads layout container display flags as well. And the same thing, we can align items stretched. So it stretches all the way down to what we need it to be. Right now we're done with content top and ads on a very basic level. Let's move on and make sure this is in the first column and the workbook is in the second column. So within the content section, say articles, and workbooks. Both of them are 1. So you can say for these two items over here, we can just simply use include span 1 first and include span 1 last, because they are not flex items and they'll position themselves properly. But before that, remember that the context is important and we have to get the correct context. We can get the correct context by using the nested function to of what we have in here. So Suzy get columns, so add 1. Then we wrap the whole nested context over here. Once we save it, here, it should work fine. Now for the third item, I'll load more posts, because these two are floated, we have to clear it off. I believe we call it load more content. Clear, left. And let's give this a background of white and padding, say 4 ribbons. We look down, sure enough we have a lot more posts in the middle with a padding of, with a color of white and a padding of 4 ribbons. Alright, that's it for this video. We will find out how to make this layout responsive in the next video.